If you can dream it, you can do it. Walt Disney. Welcome to the Guyana Dialogue. I am your host, Shamiza Ali. Our topic tonight is the mission and work of the Caribbean Heart Institute in context to health care condition throughout the country. The Guyana Dialogue is being sponsored by a coordinating council of Guyanese based in the US, UK, Canada, the Caribbean, and Guyana. Funding support is by well-known philanthropist Dave Narine from Dave West Indian Imports. Please welcome my moderator for tonight, Dr. Tara Singh, who is a distinguished political and social scientist.
Thank you, Shamiza.
Welcome,
Welcome
Dr.
to
Tara.
this.
Our panelists tonight are Professor Narayan Prasad, Professor Muniram Budu, and Dr. Sanjay Ramkisoon.
Here.
Our guest tonight is the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Medical Officer of One Brooklyn Health System and attending care cardiac surgeon at Maimonides Hospital, Brooklyn. Please welcome Dr. Gary A. Stevens.
Thank you.
Dr. Tara, please continue.
Yeah, thank you very much. We welcome Dr. Gary Stephen. I know he is very busy, and we are grateful that he can spend his time with us to help us understand better the work and mission of the Caribbean Heart Institute. As you know, health is a very important one of the major emphasis that the government has put is on health. They command the second highest budget in the country, over $130 billion, and that will increase because they see health and education in a symbiotic relationship. They nurture one another. Dr. And one of the deficiencies the health system had is that anyone who had a heart problem, they couldn't deal with them in Guyana. They had to send them overseas at exorbitant costs. I know that when Guyana was founded in 1992, around 1994, we had to raise money to send patients to do heart surgery in Mount Hope in Trinidad. And after 2 years, we divert to United States where we get better costs, better benefits, and Ghana Watch, as you know, we have conducted over 60 heart surgeries so far now, and that was very costly. But
So
luckily,
if we can,
most of the surgeons who work on that would volunteer their services. Now, Dr. Gary Stevens, I believe, is a Guyanese born. He was trained in this area and he felt he can do something to help at least not only the suffering that people go through with heart problem, but to alleviate the costs. So he was motivated to found the Caribbean Heart Institute in Georgetown, Guyana. So, Dr. Stephen, we welcome you and we thank you for this great effort you are making in the healthcare sector of Guyana. Can you please tell us as a broad, before I pass you on to the panelists, give us a broad insight into the work and probably tell us what motivated you to set up this Heart Institute. So please go ahead.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me here tonight. So I was born in Guyana, Linden, Guyana. Did my medical training in Bhopal, India, with a Guyana government scholarship. So went back home to Guyana and then moved here to the U.S. to get some advanced training. The Heart Institute was born actually of an idea, and the first step towards creating the Heart Institute was on the 12th of December 2004. And the reason I remember the date so well, it was the date I got married. And President Jack Dio was in town. and he was meeting faith leaders. I assume they're faith healers too, but he was meeting church leaders here in New York. And my phone rang at about 7 o'clock in the morning, and it was the pastor who was going to marry me that afternoon. Well, he wasn't going to marry me. I was going to get married to my wife, but he was going to take care of the ceremony. And he said to me, I'm meeting President Jackie. Maybe you want to come by and give him the idea you had. I was slightly hungover from the wedding night. So, but I did wake up. It's difficult to get up at that hour. And I did go to meet President Jack Dio. And I mentioned to him the idea. And Dr. Singh was mentioning briefly about the cost. And so I give the idea to him, and that's how the Heart Institute, there's a little bit more there that I can get into as the program go along. But that's pretty much how the Heart Institute was born, giving him the idea. And he said to me, Gary, I'll get back to you in about 4 weeks. And, politicians, I didn't believe him. But 4 weeks later, my phone rang. And he actually said, come to Guyana, let's have a conversation. And so I went to Guyana, and that's how we came to be.
Mm-hmm. All right. The panelists will probably ask you more questions, but why you think at that point it was important for you to set up this institute? Or you worried about the incidence of heart problems, that patients are not getting the requisite care and attention? Probably the cost factor might inhibit it from going overseas to get advanced treatment.
So I had just completed my training at the Cleveland Clinic, and I met a few surgeons from Guatemala, and I think one was from Argentina. But I was impressed by the fact that they were all trying to go back home to their country to do heart surgery. And I thought, I need to go home and help my own country do heart surgery. So I went home to Guyana, and at that time there was only one cardiologist in the country, and you probably all know Dr. Dubé. And he wasn't a trained cardiologist. It's just that he had spent so much of his time doing cardiology that he's the one. So we had one cardiologist in the country, and I knew that West Indies had a very high rate of cardiac disease, especially Guyana, Trinidad, and Suriname. They have very high coronary artery disease rate. So I spoke to President Jack Dio, and I asked him, how much money do you spend every year sending people to the United States? And he says it costs us about $50,000 per person for open heart surgery. And I could get about 10 people done for $500,000. So I said to him, maybe you ought to give me that $500,000, and I could try to raise monies from some friends and see whether we can multiply that. Instead of doing 10 patients, we can probably get as much of 100 patients done for the same money. And the businessman he is, he says, well, that makes sense to me. And so we decided, okay, so we took his $500,000 and tried to create a structure that will help us to do a diagnosis and stuff. So a lot of the ideas about doing heart surgery was born out of that, a recognition that Guyana, which had, according to the World Health Organization, some of the highest coronary artery disease rates in the world. We actually have a higher coronary artery disease rate in the West Indies than they do in Western Europe. And, recognizing that and recognizing how many people were suffering, that's what drove us to have the idea of the Caribbean Heart Institute. And to try and pull it off, I visited the Bahamas, Jamaica, Barbados, and Trinidad. These were all countries that had started a heart program. And so we borrowed small ideas from each one of these countries and created Guyana. So the Heart Institute, the structure, is born by pulling ideas from these 4 countries as we went around the Caribbean.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sanjay. Any kind of comments you want to make or clarification?
Sure. First, I would like to say thank you very much for having me on the program, and I would like to congratulate Dr. Gary Stevens, for doing such a wonderful job. He's always very caring. Before I ask him a question, I think the last time I interfaced with him, apart from the airport trips that we see each other, it was during middle of COVID that I had a patient that needed CT surgery, and I wanted a second opinion on a CAT scan, and I couldn't find anyone, and I called him up, and he answered his phone the very first ring, and we FaceTime with each other, and we went over a CAT scan. I don't know if you recall.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I always remember that story. And I thank you very much. You're a true son of the soil, going back to Guyana and contributing in a very, very significant way. Guyanese all over the world are very proud of you and Dr. Carpin for the work that you guys are doing at the Caribbean Heart Institution. Um, I know the statistics very well and how Guyanese, in particular in the South and the Southern South America, are affected with coronary vascular disease and stroke. And so, you guys are doing a wonderful job. I just wondered if you could share some of the statistics. I know every time I visit Guyana, I see you at the airport. So just share some of the statistics with us, what's happening at the Caribbean Heart Institution and how you guys have developed this list of patients that needs, coronary artery bypass graft. And those who, I know you guys are doing valve surgeries as well. And a year or two ago, you did some left atrial appendage surgery. So talk about these procedures because people need to know of the great things you're doing back in Guyana.
All right. So we do the full gamut of heart surgery, save heart transplant and aortic. So when we started in 2004, we decided 2005 actually. 2004, the idea, in a very short period, we were up and running. And we decided to start with just doing diagnostic cardiac catheterization. And now we do in excess of 1,000 cardiac cats a year. And we do about 600 cardiac interventions, which Dr. Carpin and the interventional cardiologists do. So we do a pretty decent amount of volume. And in terms of open heart surgery, we do about 120 open heart surgeries a year. And it varies up and down because, COVID had kind of blocked us out a little while. We do coronary artery bypass. We do heart tumors. We do sometimes when you have a major heart attack, you can develop holes between the different chambers of your heart. We do those surgeries. We've done appendage clip-in and ligation for patients who have abnormal heart rates. So we do the full amount of surgery. We started out many years ago with a very small machine. And the reason is I knew back in India, when I had studied in India, they were using this small machine to do cardiac catheterization. So that's what we bought. It cost us about $450,000 with government help. And I raised another $500,000 from some good friends, promising them that I'll pay them back, which I never did. And we were able to get the program up and running. And so right now, we're not the only ones, as you know. Since we started, I think Woodlands also does some PCI. So when I talk about 600 and something cardiac interventions, that's not all that's done in Guyana. I think between Woodlands and Balwan Singh, they probably do another 200, but we are the major player in the market as we go along. It has been a process. We started out all those years ago borrowing cardiologists from Barbados, Dr. Massey and Dr. Ishmael. They'll come down every few weeks and do cardiac catheterization because everybody thought we were crazy to try and set up a cardiac surgery program and an open heart surgery program in a country that didn't have cardiologists. I think they all thought we were crazy. But, we went from having no cardiologists and we're about to come up on our 20th anniversary to now having, I think, like 4 interventional cardiologists in the country. But there was a period of time there where times were a little tough. And we brought a cardiologist from India who worked with us, but sometimes that doesn't work out. And then, I heard we were struggling to get a cardiologist, and I heard there was a young man named Mahendra Karpan living in Boston. So I jumped on the JetBlue and I went down and invited him and his wife to lunch. I gave them a lot of wine, so they were slightly drunk, and then I sold them the idea about coming home to Guyana. So Mahendra decided, yes, why not? And he had some issues with the government, so we went to Mr. Jagdeo and Mr. Luncheon, and we worked things out, and the rest is history. Mahendra had done an excellent job, and he came home. So we do a lot, and not only cardiac interventions like stenting, he also does electrophysiology. And myself and the team comes in and do the surgery on a regular basis.
So he's doing all the ablations, AFib ablations?
I don't know that he's done AFib. He does mostly device implants, pacemakers, AICDs, for the audience out there, defibrillators. So that's his area of expertise. But they also do a lot of stenting. One of the things we've done in the Heart Institute is to try and push the envelope and to see what's possible. So we try introducing new technology as the years go by. And so we introduced electrophysiology. 2 years ago, we started to do a heart valve going in through the groin instead of doing it through open heart surgery. That's a relatively new technology here in the US, but we were able to start doing that in Guyana. We just introduced an ECMO machine in Guyana a few weeks ago. So we keep pushing to see what's possible. And we did the first set of pediatric open heart surgery with the help of Mr. Subraj and his team many, many years ago. He helped to fund the whole team to come down to Guyana, and we did the first set of open heart surgery just to prove that it could be done and could be done safely. So with the help of a lot of folks around, we have been trying to push and try to do more as we go along.
All right, thank you. Professor Narayan?
Yeah. Dr. Stephen, let me commend you also for your service to the country of your birth, and to have the commitment. But sometimes politics get into the way because politicians are not aware or not versed in all of the opportunities that exist outside of the country. Can you tell me what kind of resistance, if any, you have experienced in this process of getting into the Guyanese context to offer this service?
Well, that's a good question. I did say we got in there and we got going very quickly, but it wasn't actually as smooth. It's interesting that when we started out, there was a lot of resistance. There's a lot of folks in Guyana who thought, one, we shouldn't be investing money in heart surgery. We should be investing money in clean water and some of the infectious diseases that are there. That heart surgery is for an industrialized country and we shouldn't be doing it. So it's a lot of pushback when we started to do open heart surgery. Unfortunately, what I think they don't recognize is that Guyana, while it's true, we have a unique situation in Guyana and some of the other, because also of our demographic makeup that make cardiac a very big issue for us. We run a diabetic rate of close to 15 or 16% of the population, which is very high. And that leads to all sorts of kidney and heart problems. So yes, there was a lot of pushback, but I've always said to folks, I found Mr. Jagdeo somebody I could do business with, which is once he commits to something, he usually will try and help you to get it done. And so with all the pushback, I remember going to a meeting he was having at Guyana one evening, and he said to me, "Gary, come with me." And so I sat in this nice little car. We drove back to the State House there, and he sat down. He says, "I know there's a lot of pushback, but we are going to get this done. You don't listen to them. I'm going to support you in trying to get this done. And to his word, he insisted. So for the first time in Guyana, we were able, and he said to me, do not make it a part of Georgetown Hospital. Make it so that with the kind of program you're going to set up, you need to have control over it. So we're going to allow you to set up within Georgetown Hospital. So right now, to quite a large degree, we operate in Georgetown Hospital, but we operate autonomously. Our nurses are across the board. So we have a very unique structure that came up as a result of a conversation with the Vice President and Mr. Luncheon many, many months ago. And so that, and the Minister of Health, I'm blanking on his name right now. Yeah, we were able to set up that structure, but it wasn't an easy and smooth going. It took some doing to be able to get there. Over the years, while they have bought into the idea, I think open heart surgery, as probably people all realize, is very expensive. It's not cheap. And so the cost factor has also been an issue. And, 4 or 5 years ago, we weren't making as much money as we do now as a country. So that was also a little bit of a struggle. And so we combined whatever the government could pay us with charity and donations from the hospital. And those of us who have gone to Guyana in 20 years, I've never been paid a cent for open heart surgery. We donate our time. So the monies we get is primarily to help make sure that the nurses are paid and the folks on the ground in Guyana are paid for the work they do. And so with that structure, and then the government had given us breaks on importation duties and stuff. But as I said, it's been a struggle. And finally, in the politics, as government changes, things change. So as you go from one government to the next, they look at what the last government was doing with some skepticism. So sit down and try to explain to them. I don't think they see. So it took a while as the government changed back in 2015. It took a little while getting the new government to buy into the idea, and they wanted to change our payment structure. And that made life very difficult. Then the new government came back, and then they switched back. So maneuvering around the politics has been, I've learned a lot, actually. I could kind of write a book, but I wouldn't go on.
Yeah. As as a follow-up, Guyana is a fast developing country. And as you know, the infiltration of diet within the country, fast foods and all of these things, add to the problems of health. And I was just thinking, how do you integrate your work, which is really involved with diet, and to integrate that with the current infiltration of the kind of fast foods that are now so prevalent in the country?
Well, it's interesting because what we do in a lot of ways is rescue on the back end. So we in a lot of ways, what we do almost represents a failure, because persons have already developed cardiac disease and stuff like that. And so, I was having this conversation even with Congressman Jeffries a few weeks ago, which is the government is better off investing money upstream in patients we have a high diabetic rate in the quarantine. We ought to be investing money there. I know I think it's in Finland or Iceland, one of those countries, they do diabetic screening when you're in high school, and they try to make sure they identify folks early and be able to treat. Because many times when you develop a coronary artery disease, it's 10 or 20 years down the road. So, and when you tag on the change in diet on top of that, you are going to have a problem. A typical example is Afro-Guyanese. If you go to Guyana and you see Afro-Guyanese with coronary artery disease, they don't have a large amount of coronary artery disease in Afro-Guyanese. They have a lot of heart problems, but not a whole lot of coronary artery disease. But if you come here to the US and you meet those same Afro-Guyanese with the US diet, they have a significantly higher coronary artery disease. So you know that the infiltration of the diet, this Western US style diet into Guyana, is going to make a huge problem for us as we go along. Look at Trinidad. You know, Trinidad does, the American Association says, you know, you should probably get for every 100,000 people, you know, about 50, 60 open heart surgery. Trinidad is almost twice the amount for the type of population they have. So we are headed in a very, very difficult direction. And so government is going to have to do interventions around, you know, either setting up clinics in the quarantine and other places, which can be helpful to folks, you know, maybe encouraging businesses, you know, giving them a tax break if they're encouraging workers to go and exercise, you know, or to eat healthy, or make sure that your workers go and see the doctor once a year. We're going to have to come up with innovative ways, because I can guarantee you it can cost us $1 today, but it's going to cost us $100 down the road just trying to fix this problem.
All right, thank you. I think, Shamisa, we can take a break now. Then we go on to Professor Boodoo.
Absolutely. We'll be right back after these messages. And we are back. Dr. Sarr, please go ahead.
Yeah. Professor Boodoo, your turn now to seek any clarification or ask any question to Dr. Stevens.
Thank you. Dr. Stevens, good to meet you, and welcome to the Guyana Dialogue.
Thank you.
What is the mission or vision of CHI, and how does this fit in with the healthcare initiative that the government has embarked on?
Right. So we gave ourselves the name Caribbean Heart Institute many years ago, and maybe to some degree humble arrogance, because we were the smallest program in the Caribbean, but our view was always to be, you know, to spread a bigger and wider footprint around the Caribbean, especially our brothers and sisters in the Eastern Caribbean, because those islands have very small populations. And it's very difficult for islands with small populations to support the open heart surgery program, because again, open heart surgery is expensive. So when we gave ourselves that name, the vision was, let's get ourselves up to par in Guyana, and then slowly expand ourselves into the rest of the Caribbean. And then we don't have to change our name, because we already had the name going for us. So that was our long-term vision. And like I said, maybe, you know, surgeons call it humble arrogance, to believe that, you know, I can do something 20 years down the road. With the help of the government, I think what we need to do is the interventional program on the ground is 24/7. And I want to say something about that. You know, right now, I think the last number they quoted for me is 27% of patients who came to the emergency room with an acute heart attack in 2004 died. Now it's down to 4%. And it's down to 4% because we now have the availability of relatively not, it's not up to where the US standard is, but patients can get intervention relatively soon, within 24 hours or less. And so that has made a huge difference. So that's just showing you how much it has saved patients' life. In the open heart field, though, we struggle a little bit because we need to have a team. As you know, you can be a good surgeon, but if you're not surrounded by nurses and anesthesiologists. And so what the government has done is just help us to embark on training cardiac anesthesiologists in Canada. And so we have Dr. Pradeep, who's on the ground. He is a cardiac surgeon. And so we're hoping within the next few years to be able to build a full team that's offering cardiac surgery 24/7. I'm not as disappointed because I know Trinidad took almost 30 years to get there. So we're probably going to get there ahead of them. But I think that's the next step. The next step is being able to offer these services 24/7. Right now, cardiac surgery is still offered. We have two teams, myself and Dr. Mohammed, who comes out from Trinidad, who trained with me here in New York. So I know him very well. And so we have two teams that go down, but we're hoping to be able to do it on a continual basis. So yes, that's where we're headed. And we've got pretty decent support from the government. I think, like everything else, we are, and not only in Guyana, we hear the big names like Mount Sinai and stuff like that. And we're always thinking that bigger is better. But I think we're trying to encourage the government to invest in our local program, help us to grow, because if the one thing that Dr. Carpen's story has told us is if we don't concentrate on having Guyanese build a program that can stay, it's not going to be sustainable over time. So if you have Guyanese who are willing to come home and build a program on the ground, that's fine. The biggest issue we faced is an interventional cardiologist makes a lot of money, and they've studied a long time, and they're entitled to make the kind of salary. And so what we can do is to say, come home, we want you to work with us, but we're going to pay you half of what you would make if you were living here in the US. So one of the things we've committed to do is to making sure that the surgeons, the nurses, for example, England stole a ton of our nurses a few years ago. And these nurses are all open heart surgery nurses. And so if we don't pay them appropriately, they're going to leave. So it's a combination of having that conversation about what's possible with the government, but making sure that people are reimbursed appropriately so they want to stay home and, they can take care of their family and build a house. So that combination is what's happened to drive this service.
But you mentioned that there's a national effort from the government to train and retain health workers. In your case, what specific workforce needs, for example, cardiologists, nurses, and technicians, do you face that in CHI? And what do you think how this would integrate within the healthcare system in Guyana?
Well, the one thing, and I hope there are no nurses here, I hate to say to them how wonderful they are and how I couldn't do my work without them, but I don't want to tell them that. I'm not serious. Yeah. But the nurses are very critical to what we do. And we suffer from the nursing shortage like everyone else. What we had tried to do many years ago is to see whether we can incentivize them. So, for example, the government, most of our nurses are employed by the government, and then they get seconded to the Heart Institute. And they do that so that they can maintain their years of service and stuff like that in the union. And what the Heart Institute had done is to offer them a little bit more than you would normally make. And the reason we have to do that is these nurses take 1-2 years to get the kind of experience. And then if you lose them, then you have a problem. So it's about trying to figure that out. How they structure that from a political standpoint, I don't know. It may very well just have to be the way we're structuring it right now, in which the government helps us to give certain skilled workers a little bit of an extra reimbursement. Nursing is probably our biggest struggle as we go. And then technicians. There are certain positions in cardiac that people don't hear about very often. They're perfusionists, they're technicians, they work in the background, but these people are critical to what we do. And in our system, we don't have a history of really figuring out how to reimburse them appropriately. And I keep coming back to the reimbursement issue because I think it's our biggest factor as we transition. And a lot is going on with the country. Things are more expensive, and these nurses are looking for better places to go. So many years ago, the Heart Institute will pay slightly more, but now we compete with everybody else. So nursing is a big issue. What the government could probably do, and I know they're trying to do, is to bring nurses from outside the country and train them. The difficulty you have in a specialized area is if you bring nurses from outside the country and after a year or two they leave, you're back to having, you need continuity for these specialized areas. So a nurse who is in a regular general medical ward and a regular surgical ward who is taking care of patients with pneumonia and stuff like that, all well and good, you can have that transition. But once you start to move into these specialized areas, you need continuity. And so that's what we need to invest in Guyanese who wants to stay home or people who want to make Guyana their home.
What about equipment? Do you have the same problem with equipment? Do you have enough modern equipment there, or there's a big need for that? And how, again, the government has this initiative going, right? How is this, what's your institute tying with the government, in terms of all this equipment and all these personnel that you require?
Yeah. So the equipment is the cardiac cath lab we have in Guyana is actually better than the one I have here in New York. So, just so you know, so we have a very good cardiac cath lab, very good equipment. The struggles we've had with these equipments is they're very finicky, and they're very susceptible to changes in electricity and power. And so that's been an issue. And so in the cardiac cath lab, for example, we don't take our power directly from Georgetown Hospital. We brought in our own transformer. We take power directly off the mains, and then we pass that power, and it goes through. There's a generator, and then we have a room almost the size of a bedroom that's full of batteries. And those batteries can run the cardiac cath lab for an hour if everything goes down. So hopefully within an hour, if we're caught in the middle of a problem. So these things are extra cost that you would have incurred over the years, but were necessary for safety for patients. So we have a double backup. We have our own transformer. If that goes down, the generator kicks in. If the generator fails, the battery kicks in. And so the cardiac cath lab can continue to run.
And just one lab you have only?
We have only one lab. I was just about to get to that. What we said to the government is we actually should get 2 labs. So we've actually been exploring that idea of having 2 labs because it is the major referral institution. And I know they're thinking of putting a lab in New Amsterdam, but they did start to have that conversation with us about putting 2 labs in place. And then the equipment, like I said, they're all subject to, one of the difficulties we've had over the years is the variation in power. And that's always affected some of our equipment. No matter some of we put like surge breakers, but some of the surges that come through those things blow right through those into the equipment. So that's been a challenge, but on the whole, it's been good. And the government has been supportive of us over the years.
It sounds like a war zone.
I gotta tell you a story. Many years ago, when we first got there, how we got to being here, we were operating somewhere and we lost the light completely. And then somebody was saying to us, we should go downstairs and bring up their bicycle. And the little light that comes from the we should bring the bicycle up into the operating. Actually, we never got that. But just so over the years, we tell some of the stories here as we look back. But with every listen, you could throw up your arm or you could look to find ways to go about it. And I think one of the things our team has done is try to figure out ways to go by these things. And one thing about Guyanese, and we're very creative people. So
Mhm.
when we brought the team from New York to teach our folks in Guyana, I can tell you we've had some reverse engineering. There's some things that we do so well in Guyana that now the nurses are trying to take it back to the U.S. So
Wow.
that's one thing about Guyanese. If you take
Yeah.
them a certain way, they're going to take it the extra mile, and they've done a really good job.
Okay, Shamisa, there is a viewer who has a question. Chuck Singh, can you read it out? Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, can you please
Uh,
read it out?
sure. So, good evening, everyone. I have a few questions. What percentage of the Caribbean Heart Institute operating budget is covered by the government of Guyana? Two, is there an out of pocket cost to patients for open heart surgery done by CHI? Three, does the patient have to pay for the consultation, echocardiac catheterization, and other tests needed for the surgery? And four, does the patient have to pay for post op care and follow up?
All right. So that person is trying to test my memory. So let's see if I go through them. As it stands right now, 90% or more of all open heart surgeries or procedures done at the Heart Institute are covered by government. It costs patients no money to do the procedure in the heart. We do have the ability for patients who have work in the private sector and have private insurance who wants to come through their private insurance. You can do that, but that's not that's a very small amount of the patients we do. And the government doesn't discriminate. As a matter of fact, I think we you can be a foreigner and comes through the emergency room at Georgetown Hospital. Once you end up with us, we have no conversation about your ability to pay. The government pays for it. So that's how that's covered. In the run up to surgery, if you come to our outpatient facility, there's a cost for echocardiogram and EKG. If you come through Georgetown Hospital itself, in their outpatient clinic, there's no cost to EKG and echocardiogram. So again, it's a choice. So if you come as an outpatient, you pay. And we also have, which is something we probably should relook at with the government, is because the cost of open heart surgery we set with the government in 2012, and we've never changed it since, with all the changes in what's gone on. So it's been a little bit of a struggle, but we do an all-in cost with patients for the most part. So if you show up and you have open heart surgery and you spend 5 days or 6 days in the hospital, there's no additional cost to you. If you stay in the hospital for 3 weeks, what we start to do after about 10 days is there's going to be a cost for medication, but there's no markup in anything you do. So in a lot of ways, it's mostly service oriented, and the majority of the cost is carried by government.
All right. Thank you, Doc. Dr. Sanjay, over to you.
Sure. You know, they said too much information leads to analysis paralysis, right? So it's a beautiful thing that you're there and there's not much information to look at in terms of medical information. But it's good that you're bringing all your expertise from the U.S. and working in Guyana. Now, with the new digitalization that's going to be happening with EMR intervention, I think it's going to be easier to track patients from different parts of the country, and the continuity of care is going to improve. At the moment, does CHI have a separate EMR that they're using?
No.
No.
So it's kind of interesting. As you know, like you said, we are all accustomed to EMR here in the U.S.
Right.
So when we first opened the Heart Institute, we introduced an EMR. So we were introducing EMR way back in 2004. but none of the physicians want to write in the EMR. They find it
Right.
easier writing on paper. As you know, it's so much, especially if you're not good at typing and maybe you're using only one finger, it could take a long time for you to type a note. So what I think we are hoping to do now, and once we're working with Jarsong Hospital, we'll have to interface with their EMR. But I think AI is going to allow us to make that easier for some of the physicians. So we're looking to an AI-capable EMR, because now the EMR, I could speak to you like I'm speaking now, and it does a very good job of putting it together in a nice note. So
I'm
that's
using it in the office right now.
there you go. So
It's
I
really
think
cool. It gives me an extra hour every day.
there you go.
Yeah.
So for some of the older physicians who don't want to do the typing, we will start to use that, and that's going to make our life. And like you said, one of the good things about electronic medical records is you can track all over the country. I think it's a really good thing the government's going. You'll be able to look for pockets. We'll be able to tell, okay, in this specific area, we have a high diabetic rate and what is going on. So there's so much information. Once, we are able to protect patients' information and it's portable, I think it'll be a wonderful thing to be able to do. I'd love to see it, be a part of CARICOM, actually, as you move around the Caribbean, to make your medical records portable with you. I think would be amazing. But yes, digitalization is the way forward.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick follow-up. I know it's the Caribbean Heart Institution. Are we getting any patients from other Caribbean islands or countries, South American countries?
Yes, but not as much as we anticipate. We do get patients every now and again from Barbados, St. Lucia, Antigua. So they do come in. One of the things, and that's probably because we still need to be able to form up what we're doing in terms of open heart surgery. But we anticipate in a year and a half or so, once we get all that squared away, we'll spend some time doing some work in the Eastern Caribbean, especially Barbados is there. So a lot of folks from the Eastern Caribbean go to Barbados. But remember, in Guyana, our cost of open heart surgery is 1/3 of what it costs in Trinidad and Barbados. So there's some insurance company in Trinidad who've been reaching out to us and saying maybe we can send patients to Guyana because it's 1/3 the cost of Trinidad. And so I think there'll be a good market for issues like that if we go forward.
All right, Professor Narayan, over to you.
Yeah, Dr. Stevens, for some time, there was some talk about a paradigm shift in health within Guyana. Now, as you know, the Guyanese situation is where doctors, or they're integrated they're homegrown doctors, but there are a lot of Guyanese outside of Guyana who are willing and able to contribute to this paradigm shift that needs to occur, because you're dealing with an antiquated system. Sorry about the term, but that's in reality what it is. Because in today's development stage, we have to accelerate that shift. Have you had any thoughts on bringing about this shift, this paradigm shift? And have you found that the government, given that it has 5 years, is willing to listen and to accommodate to some of the suggestions or policies that you may offer?
Right. So yes and no. I think somebody say you don't know what you don't know. So I think one of the difficulties is as we go into Guyana is who you listen to. And I think what I've been having conversations with the Minister of Health, and I say to him ever so often, it's all well and good to listen to the Northwells and the Mount Sinai's of New York. But just so you know that it's not easy to transport something 2,500 miles away and make it look good. I mean, sometimes these hospitals can transport something from Manhattan to Brooklyn and make it
Yes,
work. And this
true.
idea that some or the other we believe they're going to transport it 2,500 miles away, it's not easy. So I think you have to be smart, and you're going to have to be able to determine as a policy exactly what your push is going to be like in a few years, and make use of Guyanese in the diaspora who are willing to come back and help you do that. I also believe the government has to determine what it wants to be. Are we going to be this hybrid system, or are we going to have more of a national healthcare system? But even if we go down that road, I also believe government ought to be able to. We don't have a full infrastructure for medicine. And one of the things we probably could learn from the Americans is we have a lot of private hospitals out there. We have Balmansing Woodlands. I think government ought to be able to give these hospital grants and be able to say, okay, if you're good in OBGYN, for example, we're going to give you a grant to help you raise the standard of OBGYN in the country and hold them accountable. So I think it's a combination. First, I don't think I see as comprehensive a policy as we go forward. I know they're struggling. There's a lot happening very rapidly, but I think we have to figure out what is it we want to be in the next 5 years. Digitalization, as Dr. Ramkisoon mentioned, is an extremely good thing. But the government needs to say, okay, who am I going to listen to for specific areas? And it's not all about the Northwells and the Mount Sinai. There are a lot of the diaspora Guyanese that you could listen to that will help you to bring some of these things up to par. So yes, there have to be a shift. I think it's possible. We have a lot of knowledge in Guyanese around the country. We just need to be able to draw a bigger tent and make sure all voices are heard, and then also really structure a policy to help us to develop. And like I said, we ought to get away from you know, people get access to private hospitals. Government should be looking at all hospitals as a whole. And I'm somebody who is saying that, who competes with the Balmansing, but I'm all for that overarching. And then finally, we ought to set standards in place. You should not be able to go in a hospital and call something an ICU if it doesn't have certain standards. You know, it has to have. So we have patients going to these hospitals. They say, "Oh, you're in a critical care unit," and you go in there and it's a bed with a little IV and some small monitor. That's not an ICU. So I think the government ought to start putting regulations, not go as crazy as we are here in the US, but certainly some basic regulations in place to ensure that hospitals are accountable. And then finally, we should put some report cards out there about how hospitals are performing. Are they actually performing at the level? And be able to compare hospitals and give patients better choices. So I have a lot of ideas, but
I just have one comment on what you're saying, Doc, is that I agree with you that the importation of foreign models can be incongruent with the lifestyles and the commitment of the country. And in this case, I've seen it in Guyana because I have had doctor friends who went back home and they were dissatisfied because they were offering their services free. And unless the Guyana government is open to integrating rather than depending on foreign models that does not integrate well with the Guyanese system and the Guyanese mentality, then it's going to be destructive rather than instructive.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Professor Boodoo, your last comment. We are nearing program time.
Yeah. Dr. Stevens, I think you're doing a terrific job for Guyanese, and I think you deserve the nation's thanks. And so I thank you, not on behalf of the nation, but on behalf of myself. Right?
Thank you.
Patient outcome, as you probably mentioned this earlier, is very, very important. How would you rate your patient outcome there in what you're doing in Guyana, let's say, US? And I don't want to say that's a one-to-one comparison. This is just an idea.
So we have a higher mortality rate in Guyana than you would have here in the US. Mm-hmm. So, the average mortality rate here in the US for open heart surgery probably runs in the region of about 2%. we run about 3.5%. And the reason we run a slightly higher mortality rate in Guyana is twofold. One, in the US, a lot of patients who end up with open heart surgery are patients who have a chest pain, go to their doctors, they have a stress test. They actually come in almost electively. We do have a lot of emergency. In Guyana, many patients who end up with us are patients who end up in the emergency room with a heart attack. and their heart function is no longer 60%, it's 30%. So, I mean, I'm going down there next week and I'm going to operate on at least 3 patients whose heart function is about 30%. So that's a problem. So we see a significantly sicker population in Guyana than we do here because we don't have a tradition of going to the doctor every year. You know, we just go where we have a problem, and by the time we have a problem, it's a real problem. So the sicker population we see. And then the truth of the matter is we don't have as many bailout options as they have here in the US. So if you have a major problem in Guyana in open heart surgery, if you're here in the US, you know, there is VADS and there's a lot more technology. We don't have that. So there's a limit to what we can do. You know, Professor, in a lot of ways, the way we get by the higher mortality is in some ways to tell ourselves, listen, if we weren't providing this service, significantly more people would end up dying. And so, yes, we do run a slightly higher mortality rate in Guyana, but we're hoping with time that we'll be able to match what they do here in the US. But that's going to take an entire infrastructure, and, you know, we're years away from that.
So one last comment. I agree fully with you with regards to the government making full use of the diaspora, not only in the medical area, but in all areas. I think there are outstanding Guyanese in the diaspora can help the government significantly and actually make much more rapid growth in all sectors of Guyana. So I think they need to concentrate on really depending more on their Guyanese rather than the foreigners. And also standards, codes and standards are important, not also in the medical area, but I know my own area in engineering, right? That is definitely needed. You cannot be successful and have good health care and all things, right, if you don't have good standards.
Okay. Finally, one of the things that they did here in New York is they get the hospitals to monitor themselves. So that, you know, we ought to set up a policy in Guyana where hospitals can monitor each other. Right. So thank you.
All right, Professor Stephen, we are about to end our program. I know you did ask me, I told you 1 hour, but I just want to ask you a last question. Do you have a waiting list for patients waiting to do heart surgery at the Caribbean Heart Institute? And how big is that list, if you do have it?
We have almost 200 people on the waiting list.
Oh.
And and that's also because, again, it's about access. We don't have, if we ever get to the point of giving open heart surgery every year, we wouldn't have such a long waiting list. So unfortunately, the waiting list is still very long. So we promise somebody to do open heart surgery, and then some sicker person shows up tomorrow morning and it bunks that person who is not as sick. So in a lot of ways, you want to be as sick as possible, because if you're not that sick, then you keep getting bunked for months. So yeah, we have a significant waiting list in Guyana.
Thank you very much.
Doc, we're going to have to clone you.
I have to pass you over now to our host, Shamisa. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Tara. There's one last question that I do want to take from one of our viewers, and this one is from Sheikh Abraham. He says, good night. What about training of doctors? Is UG Medical School program adequate enough and up to date with the developed nation's medical curricula?
So I could tell you on the cardiology side, they're doing a pretty good job. With I think Mahendra, Dr. Haynes, and the group, they're training a lot. They're starting a cardiology training program, which has always been a big issue, even here in the U.S. So I think the school is doing a really good job in terms of cardiology. Cardiac surgery training is a little bit more involved. I suspect it'll take a few years before we get there, but I'm very happy with what they're doing cardiology. I mean, we have cardiologists now up in New Amsterdam, in Linden. We're spreading cardiologists around the country, which is really, really good and a positive to what the government's been doing.
Well, thank you, Dr. Gary Stevens, for being here this evening. And thank you to our entire panel. Thank you, Dr. Tara, and to all our viewers. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here this evening. At this time, I also like to take the opportunity to wish all of our viewers and our panel a very happy Thanksgiving. The Guyana Dialogue will be out next week, but we will be back the following week with a new guest. Thank you, and until next time, I am your host, Shamiza Ali, and this is the Guyana Dialogue. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you very much,
Good evening.
Doctor, and thank you, panelists. Good night.
Good night.
You're a great Guyanese. Continue.